They said the king had gone mad. They said he was tearing the kingdom apart looking for a ghost. In the quiet gloom of her tiny cottage, hidden deep within the whispering eaves of the ironwood forest, Selene touched the gentle swell of her belly and knew the truth. The ghost he hunted was her, and the madness that gripped Alpha King Alaric was a sickness of the soul, a fever born from a bond that had been violently, unnaturally severed. She felt its echo in her own bones, a hollow ache that never truly subsided, a phantom limb where half of her spirit used to be. The mark on her hip, a swirling silver pattern that had bloomed the moment their eyes first met across a crowded solstice festival, now felt like a brand of hot iron. It burned with a constant, dull fire, a testament to their separation. 6 months. 6 months since she had stood in the shadows of the great hall, a nobody, a servant with nothing to her name but a secret love for a king who was her fated mate. She had watched, her heart splintering into 1,000 icy shards, as he stood before the entire pack, his golden eyes glazed and distant, and chose another. Lady Lysara Van Thorn. Ambitious, cruel, and everything Selene was not. Lysara had smiled, a victor's smirk, as Alaric placed the ceremonial mate's cuff on her wrist. Selene had felt the snap of their bond then, a sickening tear through the fabric of her being. She had fled, a choked sob escaping her lips, before anyone could see the devastation on her face. Before anyone could smell the scent of the king's heirs already taking root within her. Now, the hunters were coming. She knew it with a certainty that chilled her to the core. Lysara would never allow a threat to her stolen throne to live, and Selene, carrying the true royal bloodline, was the greatest threat of all. She pressed a hand to her stomach, where 2 tiny heartbeats fluttered against her palm. She would not let them be found. Not ever. The memory of that night was a wound that refused to heal. It played behind her eyes every time she closed them, a cruel tapestry of gold and heartbreak. The great hall of Blackwood Keep had been a river of shifting bodies, the air thick with the scent of pine, roasting meat, and the electric anticipation of the pack. It was the night of the choosing, a tradition as old as the mountains themselves, when the Alpha King would formally claim his mate before the Moon Mother's gaze. Selene had known, with the unshakable certainty of a soul recognizing its counterpart, that it would be her. Their bond had flared to life weeks earlier. Alaric had been inspecting the castle kitchens, his presence a sudden, overwhelming force of power and winter storm. He was all broad shoulders and dark, unruly hair, his eyes the color of molten gold that saw straight through to her soul. She had been kneading dough, her hands covered in flour, when he walked in. Their eyes met. A jolt, sharp and beautiful, had struck them both. The air crackled. In that instant, the silver mark bloomed on her hip, and she knew by the sharp intake of his breath and the way his hand went to his own that he had received its twin. He was her mate. The king was her mate. They had met in secret after that, in the quiet solitude of the royal gardens, under the pale light of the moon. He had been tender, fierce, and utterly captivated. He spoke of a future, of a kingdom ruled by 2 halves of a single soul. He smelled of pine and cold, clean snow, a scent that was home. He had traced the lines of her face with a calloused finger and whispered her name like a prayer. "Selene," he'd murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her. "My moon, my queen." The love between them was a living thing, a wild and powerful magic that promised forever. But forever had been stolen. On the night of the choosing, something was wrong. When he entered the great hall, his golden eyes, usually so sharp and full of life, were clouded. He moved with a strange, wooden stiffness, his gaze sweeping over the crowd without recognition. He didn't see her. He looked right through her, his face a mask of confusion. Selene's heart had hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This wasn't her Alaric. This was a stranger wearing his face. Then Lysara had stepped forward, resplendent in a gown of blood-red silk, her dark hair coiled like a serpent. She took Alaric's hand, and he didn't resist. Her house, the Van Thorns, were powerful, second only to the royal line. A union with them was politically advantageous, but Alaric had sworn to Selene that politics meant nothing against the sacred law of the mate bond. Yet, there he stood, letting Lysara lead him to the ceremonial dais, as if he were a puppet on a string. "I, Alpha King Alaric of the Blackwood Pack, choose Lysara of House Van Thorn as my mate," he had recited, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Each word was a physical blow. The pack had roared its approval, but Selene heard only the sound of her world shattering. The bond between them didn't just ache, it tore. A scream of pure agony ripped through her soul, silent to all but herself. She saw Lysara's eyes find hers in the crowd, a flicker of triumphant, venomous glee in their dark depths. In that moment, Selene knew. This was not fate. This was a betrayal, a carefully orchestrated coup of the heart. She had turned and fled, stumbling through the corridors, her vision blurred with tears. A hand had grabbed her arm, pulling her into a dark alcove. It was Marta, the pack's wise old healer, her face etched with grim understanding. "He is not himself, child," Marta had whispered urgently, pressing a small, heavy pouch into Selena's hand. "There is dark magic at play, wolfsbane and shadow root in his wine. It clouds the mind, severs the bond from his side. She has stolen him." Marta's words confirmed the cold dread in Selena's gut. "What do I do?" Selena had choked out, her body trembling. "You run," Marta had said, her eyes filled with a terrible sadness. "You are carrying his legacy. I can smell it on you, the scent of new life. Lysara will hunt you. She will not suffer a rival claim. Go north, to the old woods. I will send word when it is safe, if it is ever safe." And so Selena had run, with nothing but the clothes on her back, a pouch of gold coins, and 2 tiny secret heartbeats that were all she had left of her king. The first few months in the forest had been a blur of grief and survival. The bond sickness was a physical malady. A fever raged through her, leaving her weak and shivering. The burning mark on her hip was a constant torment, a reminder of Alaric's perceived rejection. She built a life in an abandoned woodcutter's cottage, learning to forage, to trap, to be invisible. The wilderness became her shield. The silent trees were her only confidants. Her growing belly was her only hope. The twins, a boy and a girl she felt with a mother's intuition, were a part of him she would protect with her life. They were the reason she got up each morning, the reason she forced herself to eat when grief stole her appetite, the reason she endured the crushing loneliness. Meanwhile, whispers travelled on the wind, carried by merchants and trappers who passed through the nearby village. The king was unwell. The king had grown volatile, his moods as unpredictable and violent as a winter storm. They said he was feral, that his wolf was too close to the surface, barely contained. He stalked the halls of the keep at night, roaring a name that no one recognized. He had torn apart the royal chambers, shredding tapestries and splintering furniture, his golden eyes burning with a feverish light. Lysara, they said, ruled in his stead, her hand on the tiller of the kingdom, her voice the one that gave commands. She kept him placated, isolated, a magnificent caged beast. The pack was afraid. The kingdom was suffering under her cold, calculating rule. Alaric knew only pain. A vast, hollow emptiness had been carved out of his chest, a space that ached with a loss so profound he couldn't name it. His memories were fractured, like shards of a broken mirror. He remembered a scent, moonflowers and clean, fresh rain. He remembered a pair of eyes, silver and deep as a forest pool. He remembered a voice that was music, but he could not recall a face. He could not grasp a name. The name his wolf howled in the dead of night was a ghost on his tongue, a word without meaning. Lysara would come to him, her touch like ice, her scent of cloying, heavy perfume an offense to his senses. She would speak to him in soothing tones, telling him he was ill, that the fever made his mind play tricks. "There is no one else, my love," she would lie, her fingers tracing the mate mark on his hip that felt dead and cold. "There has only ever been me." But his wolf knew better. His soul knew better. It clawed at the inside of his skin, desperate to break free, to hunt for the missing piece of itself. He was an alpha without his Lunar, a king without his queen, and the madness was a rising tide, threatening to drown him completely. He was a prisoner in his own mind, in his own castle, and the only thing he knew for sure was that he would burn the world to the ground to find what he had lost. Brennan, the Alpha King's beta and the grizzled old soldier who had served Alaric's father before him, watched the kingdom crumble with a heavy heart. He did not trust Lysara. He had seen the way she looked at the throne, not at the man who sat upon it. He had seen the flicker of something unnatural in the king's eyes on the night of the choosing, a dullness that was not his Alpha. He remembered the servant girl, Celine. He'd seen the way the king looked at her in the weeks prior, the secret smiles, the stolen glances. He'd smelled the faint, beautiful scent of a blossoming mate bond between them. And then she was gone, vanished the same night the king lost his mind. It was not a coincidence. Brennan began his own quiet investigation, speaking to old Marta, who gave him nothing but a sad shake of her head and a cryptic warning to follow the scent of the moon. He started searching, using his days off to ride the borders of the kingdom, casting his senses wide. For months he found nothing. The trail was cold, expertly hidden. But Brennan was patient. He was loyal. He would not fail the true king. The man he knew was buried somewhere beneath the layers of grief and poisoned madness. He owed it to the pack, to the memory of the old king, and to the ghost of a girl whose disappearance had broken their alpha. One crisp autumn morning, a trapper came to the keep with a pelt of a rare silver fox. As he laid it out, Brennan caught it, a faint, almost imperceptible trace of a familiar scent clinging to the fur. Moonflowers. He questioned the trapper relentlessly. The man, terrified, finally admitted he'd caught the fox near the northern edge of the ironwood, close to an old abandoned woodcutter's cottage that was, inexplicably, now occupied. That was all Brennan needed. He saddled his horse, telling no one where he was going, and rode north, hope and dread warring in his chest. The cottage was nestled so deep in the woods it felt like a secret the forest itself was trying to keep. A thin curl of smoke rose from the stone chimney, a beacon in the wilderness. Brennan dismounted, his movements slow and deliberate, not wanting to frighten the occupant. He approached the door, his heart pounding. The scent was stronger here, rich and deep, the unmistakable aroma of moonflowers and something else. Something new. The scent of alpha bloodline. Pups. He knocked gently on the weathered wood. Inside, Selene froze, a hand-carved wooden bird falling from her grasp. No one ever came here. Her heart leaped into her throat. She grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace, her knuckles white. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling but firm. "My name is Brennan," a low, gravelly voice replied. "I am the king's baiter. I mean you no harm. I am looking for a girl named Selene." Selene's blood ran cold. The king's baiter. Had Lysada finally found her? Was this the end? She backed away from the door, pressing herself against the far wall, poker held high. She would not make it easy for them. She would fight for her children until her last breath. "I don't know anyone by that name," she lied, her voice tight with fear. "Please." Brennan's voice was softer now, laced with a weary plea. "The scent of the moonflower is strong here. The king, he is not well. He has not been well since you left. I believe you are the only one who can save him. And our pack." His words chipped away at her resolve. He didn't sound like a hunter. He sounded like a man carrying a heavy burden. Cautiously, she cracked the door open, just enough to see him. He was an older wolf, his face lined with worry, his grey-streaked hair tied back. His eyes were honest, filled not with malice, but with a desperate hope. He saw the swell of her belly beneath her simple wool dress, and his eyes widened in understanding. He dropped to one knee, bowing his head in deference. "My queen," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "Forgive me. I did not know." Tears welled in Selene's eyes as the simple, respectful title washed over her. Queen. It was what Alaric had called her. Seeing the loyalty in this old soldier's face, a dam of loneliness and fear broke inside her. She lowered the poker and opened the door, a silent invitation. Brennan entered the small rustic cottage, his gaze taking in her simple existence, the hand-stitched blankets, the herbs drying from the rafters. His respect for her grew. She had survived, and she had protected the future of their pack. "Lysara poisoned him," Selene said, her voice barely a whisper, as she poured Brennan a cup of hot herbal tea. "Marta told me. A wolfsbane compound. It confused him, made him forget me." Brennan's face hardened into a mask of cold fury. "I knew it," he growled. "I knew she was a viper. She has controlled the council, signed edicts in his name. The pack is restless. They fear their alpha has abandoned them." He looked at her, his expression softening. "He hasn't forgotten you. Not entirely. His wolf cries for you every night. He is fighting it, whatever she did to him. Your presence, the existence of the heirs, it could be enough to break the poison's hold." A fragile hope began to bloom in Selene's chest, the first she had felt in 6 long months. Perhaps all was not lost. Perhaps she could still save the man she loved. But before they could speak further, a twig snapped outside. Brennan was on his feet in an instant, his hand on the hilt of his sword, his body shielding Selene. He peered through the small, grimy window. "Assassins," he hissed, his voice a low growl. 5 of them, masked, bearing the Van Thorn crest on their crossbows. Panic seized Selene. They had been found. Lysada's hunters had finally cornered her. The cottage door exploded inward, splintering into a shower of aged wood. 3 figures, clad in black leather, poured into the tiny space, crossbows raised. Brennan met them with a roar, his sword a blur of silver. He was a seasoned warrior, and he cut down the first 2 before they could even fire a bolt. But the third lunged, a poisoned dagger in his hand, while 2 more scrambled through the broken doorway. Brennan engaged the dagger-wielding assassin, their blades clashing in a shower of sparks. Selene scrambled backwards, grabbing a cast-iron skillet, her only thought to protect the lives within her. One of the crossbowmen took aim at her, his eyes cold and emotionless behind his mask. Brennan saw the movement and roared in fury. He shoved his opponent away and threw himself in front of Celine, just as the bolt was loosed. The quarrel struck him high in the shoulder, a sickening thud of metal sinking into flesh. Brennan grunted in pain, stumbling to one knee, but he did not fall. He yanked the bolt out with a snarl and surged back to his feet, his sword lashing out. But the poison was already working. A blackish tint was spreading from the wound, and his movements were becoming sluggish. He was overwhelmed. One of the assassins kicked his legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the floor. The leader, a tall, gaunt man, stepped over Brennan's prone form and advanced on Celine, a long, cruel-looking blade in his hand. "Lady Lysara sends her regards," he sneered, his voice muffled by his mask. "She does not appreciate loose ends." Celine held the heavy skillet like a shield, her back pressed against the cold stone of the hearth. Tears of terror streamed down her face, but her eyes blazed with a fierce maternal fire. "You will not touch them," she snarled, her voice imbued with a guttural power she didn't know she possessed. The assassin laughed, a cold, empty sound. "Brave words for a nobody." He raised his sword for the killing blow. Celine closed her eyes, sending a silent, desperate prayer to the Moon Mother, a final plea for the man she loved. Alaric. As if her soul's cry had been heard across 100 miles, the very walls of the cottage shook. A sound tore through the forest, a howl of such rage and primal agony that it stripped the leaves from the trees. It was a sound of pure, untempered alpha power. The assassins froze, their heads snapping toward the shattered doorway. A massive black wolf, larger than any they had ever seen, filled the frame. Its fur was the color of midnight, its muscles coiled with lethal power, but it was the eyes that held them paralyzed. Eyes of molten gold, burning with a maddened, feral intelligence. It was the Alpha King, and he was no longer caged. The king's wolf launched itself into the cottage, a blur of black fur and righteous fury. It was not a fight, it was a reckoning. The assassin nearest the door was thrown against the wall with such force that his bones audibly snapped. A second tried to raise his crossbow, but the wolf's jaws closed around his arm, crushing it instantly. The leader turned from Celine, his sneer replaced with a mask of pure terror, and tried to flee. The black wolf was on him in 2 bounds, its powerful paws pinning him to the floorboards. A final, mercifully quick snap of its jaws, and it was over. The remaining assassins, seeing their comrades dispatched with such brutal efficiency, dropped their weapons and fled into the forest. The wolf let them go. Its only concern was in the cottage. Slowly, the great beast turned. The golden eyes, moments ago filled with feral rage, now softened with a dawning, agonizing recognition. It padded slowly towards Celine, who was still pressed against the hearth, trembling. The wolf whimpered, a low, sorrowful sound, and nudged her hand gently with its massive head. She could feel the shudders running through its powerful frame. "Alaric?" she whispered, her voice choked with tears. The wolf whined again, then sank to the floor. A ripple of movement went through its body, a painful-looking contortion of bone and muscle. In seconds, the massive wolf was gone, and in its place knelt King Alaric, naked, splattered with the blood of his enemies, and weeping. His face was gaunt, his hair longer and wilder than she remembered, but it was him. The madness was gone from his eyes, replaced by a clarity so profound it was heartbreaking. "You are alive," he rasped, his voice raw from disuse and howling. He crawled toward her, not daring to touch her, as if she were a dream he was afraid to break. "They told me you were a fever dream, a ghost conjured by my grief. but you are real." "I'm real," she sobbed, relief and love washing over her in a powerful wave. He finally reached her, his hands hovering, trembling. His gaze dropped from her face to the impossible, beautiful curve of her stomach. The scent, the proof, the undeniable truth of it hit him with the force of a physical blow. The heirs he hadn't known he'd had, the children of the woman he thought he had lost forever. He fell to his knees in the blood-soaked ruin of her cottage. His trembling hand hovered over her stomach, his golden eyes wide with awe and a fresh wave of soul-shattering grief for the time he had lost. "May I?" he whispered, his voice cracking. Selene nodded, tears tracing paths down her cheeks. She took his hand and placed it gently on her belly. The moment his skin touched hers, the bond between them, strained and damaged but never truly broken, flared to life with blinding intensity. The burning mark on her hip turned into a wave of pleasant, soothing warmth. It was like coming home after a long, cold winter. At the same moment, as if sensing the presence of their father, one of the twins kicked, a strong, definitive thump against his palm. A ragged sob tore from Alaric's chest. He pressed his forehead to her stomach, and the Alpha King, the feral beast who had just torn men apart, wept like a child. He wept for the months of madness, for the pain he had unknowingly caused her, for the joy of finding his entire world in a hidden cottage in the woods. "I tore the world apart for you," he choked out, his words muffled against her dress. "I knew. My soul knew you were out there somewhere." Selene ran her fingers through his tangled hair, soothing him. "It wasn't your fault, Alaric," she whispered, her own voice thick with emotion. "She poisoned you, Lysara." He looked up, his face a mask of anguish and dawning fury. "Poisoned?" With a wolfsbane compound, Brennan grunted from the floor, struggling to sit up. The poison was making him weak, but he was alert. Marta the healer suspected it. It severs the bond, clouds the mind. She made you reject your true mate. Alaric's grief morphed into a cold, hard rage that made the very air in the room grow heavy. He stood, his regal authority returning to him with every breath of clean, unpoisoned air. He looked at Selene, his heart aching with love and regret. Then he looked at his loyal Beta, wounded and bleeding on the floor for her. "I did not choose her," Alaric roared, the sound shaking the remaining rafters. "I was drugged, poisoned. I woke up 3 days after the ceremony, screaming your name, Selene, and they told me I was mad." His eyes, clear and sharp once more, burned with a righteous fire. He had found his mate, he had found his heirs, and now he was going to take back his kingdom. He turned to Selene, his expression softening into one of utter devotion. He gently cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "I will not let her harm you or our children," he vowed. "This ends now. We ride for Blackwood Keep. She will answer for what she has done to our family, to our bond, and to our pack." He looked at Brennan, who was struggling to his feet. "Can you ride, old friend?" Brennan gave a grim, determined nod. "I would follow you into the heart of a volcano, my king, especially now." First, however, there was the matter of Brennan's wound. The flesh around the bolt hole was turning a sickly grey, the poison spreading. Selene knelt beside him, her brow furrowed in concentration. She didn't know why, but she felt a strange warmth gathering in her palms, a gentle humming energy. Instinct took over. She placed her hands over the wound, closing her eyes and focusing on the life within her, on the love she felt for her mate and her loyal friend. A soft, silvery light began to emanate from her hands, bathing the wound in a gentle glow. Both men stared in astonishment. Under the light, the grey, poisoned flesh began to recede, replaced by healthy pink skin. The wound knitted itself closed before their very eyes, leaving behind only a faint, clean scar. Brennan flexed his shoulder, his eyes wide with disbelief. The pain was gone. The weakness had vanished. "Moon Mother's mercy," he whispered in awe. You have the healing light, an ancient gift, the mark of a true queen." Alaric looked at Selene with renewed wonder. She was more than his mate. She was a wielder of old magic, the kind spoken of only in legends. The Moon Mother had not just chosen her for him, she had chosen her for the pack. She was their destiny. His resolve hardened into unbreakable steel. He would see her on the throne beside him, where she belonged. Their journey back to Blackwood Keep was swift and silent. Alaric, dressed in spare clothes Brennan had brought, rode with Selene held securely in front of him, his arms a protective cage around her and their unborn children. Brennan rode alongside, his eyes scanning the woods, alert for any further threats. Word of the king's return and the identity of his true mate would need to be spread carefully. Lysara had spent months consolidating her power, placing Van Thorn loyalists in key positions on the council and in the royal guard. A direct assault on the keep would be bloody and foolish. They needed to turn the pack against her, to reveal her treachery for all to see. They made camp at the edge of the kingdom, meeting with a handful of pack elders Brennan knew were still loyal to Alaric's line. The old wolves listened intently as Brennan recounted the tale of the poison, of Selene's survival, and of the unborn heirs. When Alaric himself stood before them, his mind clear and his alpha presence restored, their loyalty was sealed. A plan was formed. They would enter the keep not as an invading army, but during the midday meal, when the great hall was full. Alaric would challenge Lysara publicly, forcing her to answer for her crimes in front of the entire pack. It was a risky gambit, but it was the only way to avoid a civil war. 2 days later, they stood before the massive gates of Blackwood Keep. The guards, recognizing Brennan, were hesitant, but the sheer force of Alaric's presence was undeniable. He was not the confused, sick man who had been sequestered away for months. He was the Alpha King, and his power rolled off him in palpable waves. The gates were opened. They walked through the familiar courtyards, loyal warriors falling into step behind them, their numbers growing with every step. The pack sensed the shift in power, the return of their true leader. The doors to the great hall were thrown open. Inside, the midday meal was in full swing. At the head of the great table, on a throne carved to look like a snarling wolf, sat Lysara. She was laughing at something one of her sycophantic lords had said, a goblet of wine in her hand. When she saw Alaric stride into the hall, flanked by Brennan and with a pregnant Selene at his side, her laughter died in her throat. Her face, for a fleeting second, was a mask of pure shock and fury, before she composed it into a look of concerned surprise. "Alaric, my love!" she cried, rising from the throne. "You should be resting. The healers said you were unwell." She shot a venomous glare at Selene. "And who is this servant? Why have you brought this filth into my hall?" A low growl rumbled in Alaric's chest. "She is no servant," he boomed, his voice echoing off the high stone ceiling, silencing the entire hall. "She is Selene, my true mate, the woman you forced me to reject, the queen you tried to have murdered." A collective gasp went through the assembled pack. Murmurs erupted, wolves turning to one another in confusion and shock. Lysara's face paled, but she recovered quickly, adopting an air of wounded indignation. "He is mad," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at him. "The fever has finally taken his mind. He speaks in riddles and consorts with peasants. Seize him. He is a danger to himself and the pack." The Van Thorn guards, strategically placed around the hall, drew their swords and began to advance. But the other warriors, the ones loyal to Alaric's bloodline, formed a protective circle around their king. The hall was a tinderbox, ready to explode into violence. "My mind has never been clearer, Lysara," Alaric said, his voice dangerously calm. "I know everything. I know about the wolfsbane and the shadow root you slipped into my wine on the night of the choosing. I know about the assassins you sent to murder my mate and my unborn children." He gestured to Selene, his hand resting protectively on her back. "She carries the royal heirs, the true future of this pack, a future you tried to extinguish." Lysara's eyes darted around the room, seeing the doubt on the faces of the pack members. She was losing control. In her desperation, she made a fatal error. Her eyes landed on old Marta, the healer, who was standing near the hearth, her face a grim mask of vindication. Lysara knew Marta was the only one who could truly confirm the poison plot. "Lies! All of it!" Lysara screamed. In a flash, she grabbed a decorative dagger from the belt of a nearby guard and lunged, not at Alaric, but at the old healer. She seized Marta, pulling her back and holding the blade to her throat.
"This old crone is the source of these lies. She has poisoned his mind with her senile fantasies. Recant, old woman, or I will silence you for good."
The hall erupted into chaos. Marta, though terrified, stood rigid in Lysara's grasp, her eyes meeting Alaric's with unflinching loyalty. "I will not," the healer said, her voice shaking but strong. "I serve the true queen." Lysara's face contorted with rage. She had lost. She knew it. The pack was turning on her, their faces filled with disgust at her cowardly act. Her eyes, wild and cornered, found Selene. All her ambition, all her careful planning, ruined by this unassuming pregnant nobody. Her hatred, raw and venomous, boiled over.
"This is your fault!"
she shrieked at Selene, her voice cracking with hysteria. She shoved Marta away, sending the old woman sprawling to the floor. Then, ignoring Alaric completely, she charged directly at Selene, the dagger raised high, its tip aimed squarely at the swell of her belly. "If I cannot have the throne," she screamed, "then no heir of yours will ever sit on it." It was a mistake born of pure, spiteful rage. She underestimated the power of a mother. She underestimated the magic of a true queen. Time seemed to slow down. Alaric roared and lunged, but he was too far away. Brennan moved to intercept, but he wouldn't be fast enough. It all fell to Selene. As the blade descended, something ancient and powerful deep within her awoke. A protective instinct so fierce it became a physical force. She did not feel fear. She felt only a cold, absolute certainty. No one touches my children. Pain exploded through her body, not from the dagger, but from within. It was the agony of transformation, of bones breaking and reforming at impossible speed. Golden light flooded the room, so bright that everyone had to shield their eyes. It poured from Selene, a radiant, blinding nova. Where Selene had stood, a magnificent white wolf now towered. She was larger than even Alaric in his feral form, her fur the color of fresh fallen snow, her eyes glowing with an amber fire that spoke of ancient power and lunar magic. She was the white wolf of the prophecies, the Moon Mother's chosen, a legend made flesh. With a speed that defied belief, she caught Lysara's descending wrist in a clawed hand that was halfway between wolf and human. The dagger clattered harmlessly to the stone floor. The white wolf let out a snarl that was not just a sound, but a physical wave of force, a shockwave of pure dominance that sent Lysara flying backwards to land in a heap at the foot of the throne she had tried to steal. The entire hall was silent. Every wolf, from the lowest Omega to the highest-ranking warrior, staring in stunned, reverent awe. The white wolf turned her head, her amber eyes finding Alaric's. He was staring at her, his expression one of profound, soul-deep love and wonder. He saw not a monster, but the magnificent, lethal, and regal truth of his mate. She had saved them. She had saved everyone. With another ripple of light, the transformation reversed, and Selene stood before them once more, human, unharmed, and radiating a quiet, unshakable power. She was no longer a servant in the shadows. She was the Alpha Queen. The pack, as one, dropped to a knee, their heads bowed not in fear, but in absolute devotion. Lysara was dragged away by the guards, her screams of protest and rage echoing through the halls until they faded into nothing. She was stripped of her name and rank, her house disgraced, and she was exiled to the barren northern wastes, a fate considered by many to be worse than death. The Van Thorn loyalists on the council were swiftly removed, and the pack began the process of healing from her venomous influence. In the days that followed, Selene's true nature became the heart of the pack. She moved through the keep with a quiet grace, her very presence a soothing balm. She used her healing light to mend not just the physical wounds of those who had been harmed, but the fractures within the pack's spirit. She sat with the elders, listening to their counsel, her wisdom seeming to come from a place far older than her years. She was the Moon Mother, the anchor of their people, and they loved her for it. Alaric never left her side. He watched her with a devotion that was absolute, his love for her deepening with every passing moment. He had been a king, then a beast, and now he was simply a man in awe of his mate. The bond between them was a vibrant, living thing, a constant current of warmth and love that flowed between their souls. But it was not yet complete. The final step, the formal claiming, had yet to be performed. One evening, a week after the confrontation, he led her to the royal gardens, the same place where they had stolen their first secret moments together. The moon was full and bright, casting a silvery glow over the stone paths and blooming moonflowers. The air was filled with their sweet, familiar scent. He stopped before her and took both of her hands in his. His golden eyes were serious, filled with a love so deep it was bottomless. "Everything I am is yours, Selene," he said, his voice low and earnest. "My heart, my soul, my pack, my life. It has all been yours since the moment I first saw you." He knelt before her, a king bowing to his queen. The bond between us was forged by fate, but it was severed by evil. Now, I want to make it whole again. I want to make it eternal. He rose and turned, bearing the strong column of his throat to her. The faint outline of his own mate mark pulsed with a soft silver light. "Claim me," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Make it complete." Selene's heart swelled. This was the final piece, the ultimate act of trust and love in their world. The bite would seal their souls together, an unbreakable vow recognized by the earth and the sky. She stepped forward, her hand gently touching his shoulder. She leaned in, inhaling the scent of pine and winter that was her home. Then, she sank her teeth gently but firmly into the junction of his neck and shoulder. A jolt of pure energy, white-hot and beautiful, shot through them both. Their mate marks blazed with a brilliant light, the silver patterns on their skin merging and intertwining, becoming a single, intricate symbol of their union. The last vestiges of the bond sickness, the phantom aches and hollow spaces, vanished forever. Two halves of a soul became one. When she pulled back, he turned, his eyes glowing, and captured her lips in a kiss that was both a promise and a prayer, sealing their new beginning under the watchful eye of the moon. Months passed, and the kingdom thrived under its true rulers. The harsh, fearful reign of Lysara became a distant memory, replaced by an era of prosperity and peace. Alaric ruled with a strength tempered by Selene's compassion. They were a perfect balance, the sun and the moon, the wolf and the magic, leading their pack into a golden age. As winter's first snow began to fall, Selene went into labor. Alaric was a nervous wreck, pacing outside the birthing chamber like a caged lion, his anxiety felt by the entire keep. But Selene was calm, surrounded by Marta and the other healers, her own inner strength guiding her. After hours of labor, the sound of a baby's cry echoed through the royal wing, followed moments later by a second. Alaric burst into the room to find Selene, exhausted but radiant, holding two small, tightly swaddled bundles. He approached the bed, his heart feeling too large for his chest. She smiled up at him, her love for him shining in her eyes. "Alaric," she whispered, her voice tired but happy. "Meet your son and daughter." She passed him the first bundle. He looked down into the face of a tiny boy with a wisp of dark hair and eyes that, when they opened, were the same molten gold as his father's. A wave of overwhelming love washed over him. This was Torin, his son, his heir. Then he looked at the second bundle, held in Selene's other arm. A little girl, smaller and more delicate, with her mother's silver eyes and a calmness that was all her own. Lyra. He sat on the edge of the bed, his massive frame trembling with emotion, one arm holding his son, while his other hand gently held his daughter's tiny fingers. He looked at Selene, his beautiful, powerful mate, the mother of his children, the savior of his kingdom. They were a family, whole and safe and together. The madness, the heartbreak, the hunt, it had all led them here, to this perfect, quiet moment. He leaned down and kissed her, a long, tender kiss full of gratitude and a love that would span eternity. And that is how the rejected servant became the Alpha Queen. Her journey from a heartbroken outcast to a legendary ruler was a testament to the enduring power of a true mate bond and the unbreakable strength of a mother's love. She had faced down assassins, usurpers, and dark magic, not with an army, but with a heart full of courage and a hidden power she never knew she possessed. If you believe that true love is worth burning a kingdom down for, that some bonds are forged in the stars and cannot be broken by the evils of the world, then you understand the story of Alaric and Selene. Their love was a legend, whispered on the wind and told by pack elders for generations to come. It was a story of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, a single soul can find its other half and bring light back to the world. Smash that like button if you were cheering for Selene to unleash her inner white wolf. Subscribe for more epic shifter romances where fate, love, and a little bit of feral rage conquer all. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if you found out you were a secret queen with the power to save everyone you loved? Would you hide, or would you rise and claim your throne? The story of the Blackwood Pack proves that sometimes the greatest strength is found not in running from your destiny, but in turning to face it with your fangs bared.